See, the mind is not alive. We're not training it to do anything or to stop doing anything because it's not alive. It's a program. And the thing that keeps the program operating the way it does is use. Use. So whenever the mind presents you with a thought, especially a thought that is energized with an emotion, a habit pattern that we have, our tendency is to automatically identify with it. And once we identify with it, we're now replaying that neural pattern. That's the usage. And every time you use it, every time you use your thinking, you act on your thinking, or you speak from the thinking that is dysfunctional and unrealistic thinking, you suffer and you create negative consequences. We call that karma, right? And what goes around comes around, right? And then what the program does, right? Because it's a survival operation, so it's always keeping the identity of the personality in existence, right? So what it does is when the personality misbehaves, it justifies itself. It avoids taking responsibility for its misbehavior because the point of view that it involves is that everything that is happening in my experience is being caused by what's out there. So if I misbehave in relationship to somebody or something out there, I suffer the experience of it because the experience of it is uncomfortable if it's anger or fear, which it usually is, right? And then there's negative consequences, and then the program will come in and justify and explain the behavior, right? And it'll justify and explain the behavior because it can't be your responsibility, because after all, what caused you to do that was out there. So it keeps you away from being responsible for yourself. That's why one of the things that the teachings is telling us is to take responsibility for the mind and to relate to it as if it's innocent. It is actually in reality programmed to keep you alive, to keep the body alive, but unfortunately also to keep the ghost alive, to keep the personality alive. And not only to keep the personality alive, but keep the personality in a self-righteous position in relationship to everything. So the way the personality maintains its point of view is to avoid looking bad, to avoid being wrong, to look good as much as possible, and to dominate whatever's going on and avoid being dominated. That keeps it in its position of authority, right? So you could say that the underlying operational program of the mind is survival of the body, but also survival of the personality. And the survival of the personality requires that everything is viewed from a particular point of view. There's me and there's not me. Everything is viewed from that point of view. And so whatever is not me has the ability to threaten me. So whatever I'm dealing with, I'm relating to from that point of view. Okay? When you are in an awake state, your point of view changes from the limited perspective of the personality's point of view to the view from awareness seeing the personality. And so when you're viewing from awareness seeing the personality, where you're looking from changes what you see. And when what you're looking from changes what you see, and therefore changes the way you behave in relationship to what you're looking at, that gets recorded as a new neural pattern. And that's training the mind to take its programming from what you see from the view of awareness instead of what you see from the view of the personality. And every time you do that, the mind's being trained. And every time the personality attempts using certain thoughts and certain emotions to get you to behave as if it's real and you don't, that's a training. Okay? So you could say that the training the mind involves being awake, meaning that you are always paying attention to the mental activity. How are you going to train it if you're not paying attention? You can almost relate to it, it's not a completely relevant metaphor, but you can almost relate to it like an inner child. It doesn't know any better. If you're taking responsibility for your children, you pay attention to them. And you pay attention to them so they don't get into trouble or mischief. And when they do get into trouble or mischief, right, you gently correct them, right? And when they're suffering, what do? Right? You offer them comfort, okay? So when the mind's disturbed, right, when the mind is in an upset state, you do two things. One is you don't participate, you don't identify with that, you don't participate with that, and then you look to see what will help the mind calm down. What will help the mind calm down? If you redirect your attention away from the programming that's running to something that facilitates calm and relaxation, have a cup of tea, take a walk, take a nap, read an inspiring book. These are all things that will facilitate the mind calming down. So you're taking care of it, you're taking responsibility for it. You're not letting it run the programming that would have the personality seem real. And this is one of the reasons why the 8 verses of training the mind is how it's training the mind, because what the 8 verses of training the mind focus on is how you relate to others, right? And basically it's saying that if your intention is to experience your Buddha nature, if your intention is to experience your Christ consciousness, if your intention is to be that awareness, from that awareness you're looking at people who are behaving without that experience, so they're living in an ignorant state. So would it make any sense to be in conflict with them? No. And so one of the things that it says in the 8 verses is that you're looking to see how you can support and assist other people in waking up to their true nature. So if somebody behaves in a way toward you that is an expression of their mental state, which means that they're protecting themselves, or they're being aggressive, they're behaving in a way that is attacking you, and you're experiencing that from the point of view of your awareness, not your personality, then if you don't behave in reaction to what they're doing, or try and control them or fight with them, you just let them express whatever they're expressing, and stay related and connected to who you know that they really are, right? The possibility is much higher that they'll recognize their own ignorance, or they'll recognize the fallacy of where they're coming from. Because what you resist persists, yes? So if you resist other people's mental states, right, you're helping that mental state to stay intact. If you don't resist their mental state, right, you're allowing them to experience what it's like not to be made wrong, or not to be pushed back at, or not to be fought with. So if somebody calls you a name, or somebody says something that's insulting to you, one of the things that's interesting to notice about this is if somebody says something that stimulates your mental protection, that stimulates your mind to automatically, somebody says something to you and you feel a rush of rage or a rush of anger, right? And then the thoughts come out of that, right? What to say or do back, right? If you really pay attention, especially if it's something that you really that your mind takes a serious offense to, not you, not the awareness, but your mind. If your mind takes some serious offense to something, right, and you don't act on that, and you allow the other person to do whatever they're doing, and you don't resist it, and you don't counter it, or you don't fight with them, right, and you don't act on that with your mind, if you pay attention, you'll see that your mind doesn't want to let it go. Your mind will keep talking to you about it, It'll keep trying to say, no, yeah, but what about that? And what about, you can't let that go. What's going to happen? Who do they think they are? It'll keep running that for a while, right? Trying to convince you that the right thing to do is to act on this, right? But if you stay passive, if you can look at it and understand what's happening and you don't act on it, eventually it'll kind of slow down and dissipate. And it's important to watch that, because you're seeing how the mind, right, how the mind is trying to keep you in the form of a personality. That's what it's doing. It's keeping you, because who is it that's taking offense? Who is it that's being hurt? Remember, you're training the mind to become like space instead of have a position. Right? And if you look at the space in this room, as I often say, right, it doesn't have a problem with any of our positions. It allows everything to be as it is. That's what we're training the mind to do, is to allow things to be as they are. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't act in relationship to whatever's happening, right? But you're not coming from a reaction. A reaction means you're replaying a behavior from your past experience that worked. That's a reaction, right? So when you can be in the experience of your awareness, it's not a reaction. You have the opportunity to create an action. That's called skillful means. You have the opportunity to create an action. And what action do you create? Well, if you're basing it on the 8 verses training mind, you create an action that will facilitate the other person having as much of an opportunity to see things as they really are. That's the skillful means. That's the action that you're creating, right? And it's not it's not an action that's predetermined. It's created on the spot. Why? Because every situation is unique. Okay? Every person that you interact with is a unique individual, that you have a unique relationship, that there's a unique history with. So you take all that under consideration, right? And then you speak, and then you act to see what would be the behavior that would facilitate the experience of that person feeling understood, cared about, and loved by you. That's a practice, right? That's a practice. It's a practice. And all you have to do to learn about your mind, right, is pay attention when you're in line at the supermarket. When people are in front of you in line at the supermarket, watch what your mind's doing there, right? Or pay attention when you're driving your car, watch what your mind's doing there, like that. Or pay attention when you feel inconvenienced, right? Pay attention when somebody says something you disagree with, right? You know, in a certain way, in a certain sense, the political situation that we're living in right now is a great opportunity. It's a great opportunity, right? Because all you have to do is look at the news and you can watch your mind go nuts. Right? So what would be skillful means then? Given the situation we find ourselves in right now, politically, what would be skillful means? Skillful means, what's the opportunity in the situation? Yeah? The opportunity in the situation is can you watch the president speaking and watch your mind while you're listening to the president? Right? Can you watch the president speaking and know who he really is that he doesn't know he is? And if you can look at him that way and know who he is that he doesn't know who he is, right? Then you experience compassion, right? Because he's experiencing a state of suffering, right? That's a function of ignorance. What's ignorance? Ignorance simply means that you don't know what's really happening. Ignorance means that you don't see things as they are. Okay? So we're training the mind to see things as they are. And if you see things as they are, you see every other human being as yourself. And you care as much about them as you do about yourself. In fact, you care more about them than you care about yourself, right? In the sense that if you're experiencing your natural state, if you're experiencing the awareness as your identity, then you don't need anything, you don't want anything, you're fulfilled already, you're satisfied and you're peaceful. Right? Therefore, you can be generous. If you don't need anything, then what is there left to do? Give something. To who? To the people in your life, right, that aren't having that experience. How do you do that? You pay attention, you be present with them, and you are always looking to see, how can I offer them the opportunity to experience the truth? In the ways that I'm behaving with them, how can I offer that to them? That's the kind of thing that if you live with it, right? If you live with it, if you get up in the morning and and create an intention to be in the natural state as much as you can today, and to notice when you're not in that state, so when you notice you're not in that state, you can shift into that state. You're training the mind about the truth about who other people are, and you're training the mind about the truth about who you are. Because the mind doesn't know who you are. The mind has already presupposed your identity. And the mind's primary function is to infer your existence. It has to infer your existence as a personality because your personality doesn't exist. The inference of your existence happens, so you can't catch it, it's that fast. Seeing happens, right? And the inference that seeing infers your existence, right? Seeing is happening, I am seeing. It infers that there's a seer. Thinking is happening, I am thinking. Yeah. Listening is happening, I am listening. The program puts that in there, you can't even catch it. It's like Paul Hederman says, you can't be quicker on the draw than the mind when it comes to inserting your identity into everything.